Hi everyone. We're going to get started here. Thank you so much for joining us. You are at the Emerging Prevention Innovations discussion, so hopefully you're in the right place. My name is Alexandria Coari. I am the Capital Innovation Director at ReFed. And part of what we do there at ReFed, part of the work that I'm focused on, is helping to support capital providers as well as innovators. So I'm really excited to be moderating this panel today. We have 5 amazing prevention solution providers on the panel here that span kind of the gamut in terms of their approaches to prevention. So excited to hear them speak today, share a little bit about what they're working on and what the road ahead looks like. For those of you who listened to the Capitol plenary yesterday, it was really encouraging to me to hear some recognition and focus on the need for more prevention, so funding going into prevention. Historically, there's been a lot of funding going into recovery, and so these guys here on the panel are working on prevention, and hopefully if we have time, maybe we can ask some extra questions about the funding spectrum and what they're seeing there on that side of things. Just a little bit of background, again, on the landscape of innovation as we see it at ReFed. So for those who don't know, ReFed manages what we call an innovator database. And it's a living document that right now has about 450 innovators across the spectrum from prevention, recovery, and recycling. And some of the stats and analytics that I just pulled from our database recently. So about 50%, 47% exactly, of the database consists of prevention solutions. And of those 47%, about 88% of those are for-profit solutions, which serendipitously seem to work out because that is what we essentially have modeled here on the panel. So I won't claim credit for that, but that worked out really nicely. By way of introductions of who we have here on the panel, so I'll start with Peter here to my right. So Peter's the CEO of Zest Labs. He brings an extensive experience and background from engineering and operations and general management at emerging companies and large enterprises. He leads Zest Labs' effort to pioneer freshness management solutions, which he'll talk more about on the fresh food supply chain. He was formerly VP of Mac Hardware Group at Apple and the SVP of Engineering at Echelon. And fun fact about him is that he has 17 patents, which is incredible.
Wow.
Awesome. Then we have.
I want a patent.
Yeah, right?
Can I borrow one?
Can I borrow one?
I think someone else is working on one so there, but yeah. Then we have Katherine Miller. She's the Senior Director of Food Policy and Advocacy at the James Beard Foundation. She's an award-winning communications executive, a campaign strategist, and social media expert. She was a founding executive director of the Chef Action Network. And she is working at the James Beard Foundation to oversee their Chef's Boot Camp for policy and change, along with program areas designed to influence positive changes in public policy and industry practices. And fun fact about Katherine is that in September of last year, she was named 2017 Most Innovative Woman in Food and Drink by Fortune and Food and Wine. So
I know, fancy.
It's a fancy panel up here. Yeah. Next, we have Dan Kurzrock. He's the CEO and co-founder of ReGrained. He is their Chief Grain Officer, so love that title.
This is the coolest panel.
Yeah, exactly. And ReGrained really started, as I understand it, out of his hobby for and love of homebrewing beer, where he first discovered that spent grain could be used and be given a second life. He's obsessed with impact edible upcycling and closing the nutrient loop. And he's based in SF. Next, we have Emily Malina from Spoiler Alert. She's the Chief Product Officer and co-founder there. They're a Boston-based tech company helping food businesses manage their unsold inventory. And Spoiler Alert was really born out of MIT back in 2015. And they're backed by Acre Ventures, which is the VC arm of Campbell Soup Company. And they've partnered with some big companies such as the Cisco Corporation and HelloFresh, which Emily will be speaking more about. And then lastly, we have Paul Lang, who's the head of training at BlueCart. He has a lot of years of experience, not to age you, but he has 30 years of experience in the hospitality industry. He's managed restaurants, and he's worked as an estate chef in Tuscany, Italy, which is incredible. And he's worked with some really well-respected restaurateurs around the world. He started an events company that was featured in New York Times magazine, New York Times rather, and Food and Wine magazine. And now he shifted his energy to working with BlueCart to bring modern technology to the hospitality space. So really excited to hear from them and for you guys eventually to ask your questions. Maybe we'll start off, Dan, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Just giving us kind of the background on what you guys do, your focus area, and then also specifically, what is it about prevention that motivates you to do the work that you do?
Yeah, awesome. Hi, everybody. So my co-founder, Jordan, and I, hey, Jordan, back in 2009, learned how to make beer as underage college students. So, I'd like to say that our vision was super altruistic from the beginning, but really what it came down to was being really excited about a loophole, which, turns out would lead us to want to close loops. We started making bread, selling it to friends just so we could brew beer for free. And that really, not only thrilled our parents, but also opened our eyes to the massive opportunity that we feel is really been pretty overlooked. It's super common sense, right? Let's look at ingredients that are maybe created by other processes. So every time we made a batch of beer, we were also making food, and then we were throwing away the food. And that just didn't add up for us. So we took a step back and tried to think about some things that we could do with it. And you see this happening in other areas of the food system. Whey is a byproduct from making cheese. It's now a premium ingredient, right? But there's parts of the food, as our food system has gotten industrialized, there's been this creation of these byproduct streams, some of which are pretty overlooked. So we talked a lot in this conference about edible waste, inedible waste, right? So what we're looking at are things that are maybe classically treated as inedible waste, but could be actually recoverable edible food. So we call it edible upcycling, and we're really focused right now on looking at craft beer. For the pound of grain that's used for every 6-pack of beer that's produced, all the sugars are extracted to make the beer. But there's all this protein and fiber that's left behind that through some innovations in processing that we developed with the USDA, we're able to turn into a shelf-stable, super versatile ingredient that can be used to feed people. So how might we reduce waste and feed people is what inspires us, and we can do that with a for-profit business model too. There's no trade-off really between impact and the business case in food waste, which is at least makes raising money somewhat easier, but still not perfectly easy. So there's I could go on, and I don't want to talk too much, but that's kind of how we got to where we are. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. It's just such an incredible community, so thanks for having us.
Maybe we'll go over to you, Emily. Same question, just an intro to the work that you're doing, and what is it about prevention that motivates you?
Sure. So our story, spoiler alert, started not too far from here at another school down the street in Cambridge. I was in graduate school at MIT, and it was right around the time when some of the initial reports from NRDC and USDA and EPA were coming out, really putting numbers to the issue of food waste. And it was at the time I was enrolled in the entrepreneurship program there with my now co-founder, and started throwing some ideas around about how can data, how can technology, real-time connectivity play a role in connecting supply and demand around precious foods, whether that's edible or no longer edible for human consumption, but can be used for other valuable purposes, and figuring out where within the supply chain we could make an impact, and spent the majority of our time while at MIT building prototype, building the business case, and launched the company out of there 3 years ago this month. So where we focus is in sort of the middle of the supply chain, working with operators of large distribution centers and helping them to analyze, manage, and mitigate the financial losses of their unsold inventory at scale. And we do that through both software and services. So on the software side, we offer a business intelligence solution that allows them to put in place streamlined and consistent processes across a wide variety of their locations across the country, and help them to put in place robust programs for liquidation and closeouts, donations, as well as finding outlets for that valuable organic material. And on the services side, we recognize technology is really powerful, but want to help our companies, our clients, to get the most value out of our work together, but especially out of the unsold inventory that is often in their warehouses and distribution centers and losing value day by day. So we work with them to help train, implement standard operating procedures, provide data analytics support to really build the capabilities that they don't have in-house and figure out ways that they can better optimize their operations, their bottom line, and increase the community, the impact they're having on the communities in which they work with. And in terms of prevention, what's interesting for us is we really play across the spectrum of prevention and recovery, and that's because data is at the core of what we offer and can play a role across all of those strategies. So we work with companies to understand holistically all of the product that they're managing, what it is they are recovering, but also what it is they're not recovering, so that they can recover that more effectively, find new partners, new outlets to work with, and then upstream to figure out how they can use that data to modify their purchasing strategies and prevent that waste from happening at the source in the first place. So we really run across that entire spectrum of recovery and prevention.
Perfect. Maybe Peter, we'll ask you to go.
Sure. Well, probably good continuity. So Zest Labs is an ag tech company. We're looking to do food waste prevention from the source, from the field. We also do protein, so from wherever it's harvested, through to the retail shelf or to the restaurant. We work a little more upstream. We're really grower or processor centric in what we do. Our mission from the beginning was to cut the food waste, and we looked back at what was the main contributor. In the business-to-business aspect of it, what's often called food loss, the biggest contributor is early spoilage, earlier than was expected. And a lot of that's driven by a different topic going on here, is date labels, because they make a uniform assumption that everything harvested on the same day has the same shelf life, and that's just not true. Roughly a third of the product harvested on a given day will have up to half the shelf life. But when systems like managing at a distribution center, inventory rotations based on that assumption, they end up holding the product until it goes bad or nearly bad, and then they have to work with spoiler alert. So what we do is we used first principle science. We looked at what causes that, why do people have that assumption, and how can we do better? And really what we ended up with is what we'd call a dynamic date label. At a pallet level, we use science to look at, for produce, what affects respiration rate. For things like poultry and proteins, lipid oxidation, and what affects that, and how can we track it, and what does it correlate to, and a simple thing we can monitor. Temperature is a key indicator, and what we do is we track that and use analytics, predictive analytics, to say for each pallet, within the first 24 hours, we can predict the actual shelf life for every pallet with a greater than 85% accuracy. That allows us to then influence how it gets directed. Is it gets shipped across the country 5 days away to go to a retailer that needs 7 to 10 days to distribute it, sell through, and have the consumer have 5 days of shelf life? Or to a restaurant that can consume it in 2 or 3 days. Those trade-offs, that spectrum of opportunity for the food, allows us to map it, and then when we do, we cut waste from 50 to 80% in the supply chain. So we're working with a number of growers and retailers to do that, but the challenge is to get ahead of the problem and then do the right thing in distribution and understand that. And so date labels are a key piece. How do you manage that aspect of it? And obviously, the more perishable a product, the more action is required to avoid that waste. But there's a lot of synergies in the different things you hear here, and so you'll never prevent all the waste. So you have to have actions, and there's an opportunity to tie in data with things like spoiler alert or with charitable organizations, because we represent when food could be wasted even at the store level, at the shelf level, and get ahead of that and connect that data to proactively have someone come pick it up.
Great. So now maybe shifting a little bit into kind of the restaurant and food service space. So maybe Katherine, do you want to kick off the work that you're doing on food waste?
Sure. Hi, everybody. the James Beard Foundation, we're a 30-year organization that is predominantly, maybe in a lot of people's minds, known for the restaurant awards, best chef, best restaurant. And about 6 years ago, we started working in the advocacy space and looking at where chefs could make a difference. And we sort of broke that into 3 places: at the table, in their community, and from a policy perspective. And it really goes to what we sort of believe in, a theory of change related to chefs. How many have ever said, if we only got chefs to promote food waste, would we be so successful, right? Yeah, we look at them in many of the same way you do, as ambassadors, right? As cultural figures, as icons. But we also started looking at the 3 aspects of them: the behavior that they could model, both for their teams and for greater communities, the networks that they sit in, right? So the suppliers, the processors, the other chefs, the constituent, the customers, all of those things. And then how they could use that voice. I have a really bad joke that the top 50 chefs in America on social media equal 1 Kardashian. But they still equal 1 Kardashian, right? In their, in the potential power to reach people, right? So we started looking at that. And food waste was not on our radar 3 years ago at all at the foundation. In part because wasting food is actually not in a chef's DNA. Well-trained chefs are dumbfounded by the idea that they would waste food, right? Part of that is the system. Part of that is a lot of chefs, until maybe the last 15 years, a host of chefs were not using whole animal utilization, right? They were not using entirely root to leaf. Maybe they were buying things already made, right? Not made, but the fish already cut up into portion size, the chicken already broken down. So this idea that they were preparing stuff, and so people were hearing, oh no, we're out of that today, right? Oh no, there's something there. We have something new today. So for them, it was totally lost. But about 3 years ago, we started getting calls as a new trend in culinary was taking off, which is sort of fast casual, which is chef-driven institutional dining. So universities, hotels, hospitals who are hiring culinary institute-trained chefs. And we were getting calls about, well, what do we do with all this food that's left over, right? We've prepared it, but we haven't served it, right? Or we bought it, but we didn't have the run that we expected to have, right? And we had no answer for anybody, right? We were like, what? And I started calling around, and that's when we became invested in Refed and started working there. We started working with NRDC and other folks to sort of deliver customized solutions for the individual chefs in the communities where they were, right? So, oh, you chefs have this problem with restaurants in Nashville, or oh, you chefs have this problem with sourcing, or, and started looking at the table side and really looking at one of the big breakdown was if we wanted people to do whole animal utilization, if we wanted people to utilize from root to leaf, right? If we wanted people to break down their own fish, we had to reintroduce skills. And we had to retrain how chefs were trained. We had to re-educate people on how they were made. And we actually couldn't figure out how to do that now, right? For the chef that's been in the industry for 40 years, we can teach them some new skills. They can be influenced by their peers. And so with the help of John Deutsch, who's up there in the corner, and the assistance of Drexel and the foundation and funding from Rockefeller, we built a new culinary curriculum. So the idea is open to all chef instructors at culinary institutions so they could learn skills and ways to put those skills back into education so that they could train the next generation of chefs so that everyone would know what to do with. How many of you have had carrot top pesto in the last, right? Yeah, I'm a little sick of it because I feel like I talk about it all the time, but the idea that what you can do with those carrot tops that aren't just throw them into the compost bin, you can make something out of them, right? The idea that you can actually make cherry pit ice cream, don't ask, we can talk about it later, right? Right, but more importantly, that ethos is in your head, right? And the last thing I'll say is that then also led us to looking at things that were big obstacles for chefs in culinary, which have to do with date labeling. which have to do with health inspection, would have to do with the size and makeup of design of restaurants, because everybody who wants a compost bin in a restaurant, there is no place for it, right? It actually we have to figure out ways to account for it in the physical footprint. So that has led to this, a second wave of work that we're working on, which is on the policy side and working with really established advocacy organizations in support of things like the date labeling changes or residential compost or restaurant compost or changes to health laws in cities. So it's sort of two-tier, but what we're most excited about, which will launch in this fully in the fall, is this culinary curriculum supported by Rockefeller that'll launch in tandem with a consumer-facing cookbook that's coming out as well, which I'm happy to talk about.
And then lastly, Paul, I'll have you speak, but before you do, I'll just say, when I first found out about BlueCart, I was super excited because my partner is a chef, and I have seen him spend countless hours working on ordering and prepping the food to come into the restaurants, and so really interested to hear your guys' approach and how you're working on that solution.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is exciting to be here, and it's a great segue from what Katherine was just saying. So I've been a chef and worked in many different modes in lots of different food service capacities throughout my career. And about 2 years ago, I wanted to stop doing that. I wanted to kind of take my energy and focus it somewhere else. And started doing some research and looking for interesting places to work that might be able to use that experience in a different way. And I found BlueCart. And through a friend of a friend, it's sort of a network, I met the CEO of Constantine, who maybe some of you have met at different events over the years. And we totally hit it off. And I was really excited to join the team and to learn about what they were doing and then to bring my expertise and help them. So BlueCart has been around for about 5 years. Started in DC as a grad school project for Constantine and his partner in a way to help chefs optimize the way they place orders in restaurants. And it's blossomed since then. And it's now become kind of a two-sided ecosystem where we're kind of modernizing the communication that wholesale food suppliers do with their buyers and vice versa. So right now, as most of you know, that communication is done, with a clipboard and a pencil and insight or intuition. And as chefs, you take a lot of pride in that intuition, but there's data that can help you as well. So we try and give data back to both sides of that platform to help them make the best decisions possible. And we came into the space in kind of an accidental way. We saw just by creating these efficiencies in an industry that's really long ignored technology, we saw these efficiencies create a reduction in food waste on both sides of the platform. So from the buyer side, from a restaurant side, having insight into historical data and what they've purchased, and also just being able to place orders online and have more of a direct connection with their suppliers, we see a 90% reduction in order errors. And that order error starts just a very, very long chain of events that just create a lot of problems. From anywhere from returned food, wasted food, going back into the vendors, like going back into the suppliers with credits, and it's just bookkeeping. It just creates this whole long line of problems. So from just having insight into historical data and ease of ordering, we have an app on both sides where the chefs can kind of just stand in the walk-in and place their orders on the app. They don't have to write on a clipboard and then go to the phone, call all the suppliers, wait on hold, listen to voice. I don't know if anyone's ever placed an order with a fish supplier at 2 in the morning, but it's not fun. You wait on hold. There's a message that literally says tuna is $12.99 a pound. We've got some great scallops. It's this, and then you wait, and then it beeps, and then you leave your message. And usually by that time you've had a couple of beers and you're like talking. You're like, it becomes like a whole long thing. It beeps, then you got to call back and you're the same thing. It's a nightmare. and then we saw from the vendor side, go to the vendor in the morning, and then that guy has to come in, listen to that message, and decipher it, and then create an order from that and deliver it at 6 in the morning. So it's totally inefficient, doesn't work. So we've created tools on both sides through a web and mobile-based platform that communication just happens in a much cleaner way. So I'm excited. I'm here to really learn about ways that we can add, not just be like a happy, like a cherry on top, like, oh, we see food waste reduction just from the system. Is like, how can we proactively add things into the system now that we can just keep that increasing.
That's great.
Yeah.
And maybe to dive in a little bit more on that front. So is the technology, is the connection to food waste with your technology really focused on reducing errors and therefore having this access food that isn't eaten or the wrong food that they're not going to use? Or is it much, are you expanding beyond that to maybe provide a platform for things from farm or from wholesale that maybe would go to waste anyways, or that are things that people wouldn't originally be using, and so pushing new items to the platform? Where can this technology scale to in the impact there?
Yeah, so again, on both sides, but from really the vendor side to your question specifically, we have a mechanism that allows, so using seafood as an example again, like if you want to see the specials that are available that day or see what things that seafood companies pushing, you have to call and listen, or literally a fax comes in and it's like there on a piece of paper, maybe PDF email if they're really like up to date, and then you've got to react to that. You've got to decipher that, call, place the order, and that's the same mechanism. So certainly we see for like highly perishable goods, so meat, produce, seafood, we allow them to push that special or deal immediately in real time to the buyer. So they don't, if I say, hey, we need to push scallops today, I'm not dependent on my 7 salesmen to go out and tell their 75 customers each that we have scallops on special. Like I click 2 buttons and all of my buyers immediately know that we have scallops on special, and they get gobbled up just like that. And we see a really a huge increase in cart size by having that velocity injected into the system. It becomes not this analog kind of slow system. It's like, we have scallops, they're for sale, great, I'll take them, and they're done. So we see not only products that are on special, but then now something that I've really discovered here, I'm going to go back to the team and say like, hey, let's create another model and say, hey, similar maybe to like insight that you guys give, like, hey, we have seconds, or we have some ugly fruit that we're going to throw out, and that's also another market to market directly to chefs. Like again, I would love to buy a slightly ugly peach that's 60% off and use on the menu, because I'm going to make more money and feel good about what we're doing.
Yep, that's great. One other question for you, just understanding how much data you guys are gathering and thinking that there's probably a lot of power in the data that you're gathering, and as we at ReFed think about using data and gleaning those insights to understand where we should be focusing solutions and approaches going forward, is there any interesting outcomes from that data? I'm thinking specifically, have you taken away any insights around what specific food products are the most wasted, and so that's where really we should be focusing solutions going forward? Or
we're working right now on what we're calling a hospitality report. We released one last year, and like you said, we have every vertical you can imagine on BlueCart. So it's a sort of an open platform that anyone from a local friend who's making pickles who wants to sell them, to restaurants, to we have partnerships with Cisco and some other large corporations like that to sell their products directly to the buyers. We're able to have access to this just giant amount of data from across all verticals. So we're working on that now. We'll release it probably in a month or so, and we'll let everybody know when it's out and have all that information in it.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful. Well, so maybe go back to Dan. Random selections here now. So Dan, you've corrected me a few times, so I'm just going to play ignorant again here, just for the benefit of everyone here. So when I first learned about ReGrained, it was the bars. So I thought you guys were a bar company. I thought you were a standard CPG company, and that's how I saw you. And as I've gotten to know a little bit more, I've understood that isn't necessarily how you see yourself, and you use the term missing market. And potentially seeing yourselves as an ingredient company, right? So can you speak a little bit about the opportunity there, how the bars fit into your approach and your solution area, and what the long-term vision is for that?
Yeah, definitely. So while we're not a bar company, we do have really delicious bars, and I think they're going to put them out in a little bit, so everyone can get excited about that. So there's 2 sides to what we're doing at ReGrained. On one side is the supply chain development. So when I say there's a missing market, I mean that there's missing supply. There's plenty of the raw, fresh feedstock, but there's not a usable, viable, desirable food ingredient that is being created at any sort of commercial, let alone industrial scale. And that whole supply chain needs to be developed. So we partner directly with breweries. A single brewery in a single year will generate millions of pounds of this. Even a small brewery that's only maybe available in your local market. And the beer industry is pretty massive. We've got more than 2 new breweries opening per day right now. The city of San Francisco has more breweries than neighborhoods. Every day, every time they make beer, they are creating food that could be food but isn't currently handled as food. And the challenge with this ingredient is that, this potential ingredient, we don't like to use the W word, like a lot of us here, is that it's highly unstable. So it comes out of the brewery and it's very, very wet. So you look at why no one's done anything with this before, it's because it's actually very energy intensive and rather complicated to turn it into something at scale that can be used as an ingredient. So what we did is we partnered with the USDA. They actually have a really cool division there called the ARS, the Agricultural Research Service, and we partnered directly with food scientists and engineers there to come up with a way, in a very economical, energy efficient, space efficient manner to take this fresh stream coming out of the breweries and to stabilize it into something that can actually be used in the food system to close that loop. So part of our business and a lot of our time and energy has been spent on developing that supply chain, which we have to fully vertically integrate from when we harvest the grain from the breweries, we call it harvesting, and to the actual creation of the ingredient itself. No one else is doing it. No one else knows how to do it. With that, then the question becomes, okay, so now we have this seemingly infinite supply of this ReGrained grain. Where does it go, right? The material is known in the industry as spent grain, as if it's been used up. But really, it's just the sugars that have been used up. So the opportunity that we have as a company is actually to develop a brand that can educate consumers in the market on the value that is still in this grain. Yes, it's been used to make beer, but as a food, it's just getting started. It's not a spent grain, it's a super grain. And we use our brand in order to develop that market. Our vision at scale is to be like an Intel Inside for food, where we sell a branded ingredient, license our name, and we create this new category. But in order to do that first, when people are shopping, and to have that brand recall of, oh, that's a General Mills ReGrained cereal, I'm going to pull that off the shelf. They need to know what ReGrained is. And so we've developed our own ready-to-eat products, starting with bars, and we've got a savory snack coming soon. And there's a lot of different places that we can go in terms of R&D. We've made crackers and cookies and breads and pastas and oh my, we're really not limited by where we can go. It's really where we should go. So our brand is a vehicle to develop that demand, which we can then use to help create this market that we hope to serve with this technology and these applications that we've been developing. So it sounds like a lot of moving parts, perhaps, and it is certainly they're distinct but also integrated activities that our business is doing in order to create this market. And then what we hope to do is take this model and find the next overlooked and underutilized byproduct stream that we can add to our portfolio and really just close this loop in a big way. 40% of all food is wasted. We all know that stat. No one's measuring how much potentially edible food isn't being wasted, but maybe it's not being used in the highest possible use. So as upcyclers, what we're really focused on is finding that highest possible use, which is feeding people. And so we're started with beer, and we've got billions of pounds to go, literally billions of pounds to go just in the U.S., let alone globally. But the potential is, as far as we see it, infinite from here.
And I am going to bring up the question of capital and financing, actually related to you, Dan, because I know you guys did an equity crowdfunding campaign. So can you talk to the connection or the rationale for doing the equity crowdfunding campaign, how that ties in or not to building this brand, and then also some of the challenges that you maybe have faced or not on the financing side, and how that ties into this next stage that you're working on with your warehouse.
Gladly, yeah. So happy to talk about that. So we just did something called equity crowdfunding. A lot of people are really familiar with crowdfunding, where you pre-order a product basically, and then when it comes out, you get it. Kickstarter, Indiegogo. It's now, as of a few years ago, possible to actually raise money and actually sell a security in that same way. So part of our capital stack, if you will, is this channel that really democratizes access to that investment. So someone could invest as little as $100 in our company during this campaign. They could invest up to $100,000. We got the full spectrum. We raised almost $700,000 through equity crowdfunding, which was both an awesome opportunity to raise capital, but also mission-aligned capital, right? Everyone that's investing in us, there are customers, there are community, there are partners, there's brewery owners, for example, investing in this, to actually own our mission and our success with us, which is really pretty sweet when you think about it. Why should a very small amount of the world's wealthiest people and institutions be completely in charge of which ideas get funding, right? So we got to say, hey world, we've got this awesome concept, we've got this traction, we need your help to take it to the next level. And people really stepped up and supported what we were doing, which is really exciting. We also have raised some money on top of that, and it's even in the food waste space, which is really exciting, and in a lot of ways we're just we're turning trash into money, right? It's a pretty compelling business proposition, but raising early stage, kind of for what is seen as risky for pretty much any investor, it's even hard. And one of the things that I like to, and I've just started trying to go beyond my I don't know what the right word is, maybe insecurities in saying this. Like I recognize I am a white privileged male founder, right? And it took me 2 years to raise the money that I needed to take this idea, which everyone in this room probably, I hope, would agree is a great idea that should be given a shot, right? So there are so many ideas that are probably not being funded because of that lack, of access for people where it's even harder to get that first meeting. So I love equity crowdfunding because it really truly does democratize that, and it gives founders the opportunity to say to the world, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Will you join me in this? Thank you. Let's do it. So that's how we think about it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Maybe switch over to Emily, if you will. So you mentioned a bit about kind of where you guys focus on the middle of the supply chain. Wondering if you could give an example or two of some of the clients that you've worked with, either by name or not, but and some of the impacts that you've seen because of the technology they've adapted, both on the prevention side, but also on the recovery side.
Sure. So I think you alluded, Alex, to a couple of our customers. I think pretty interesting juxtaposition. One of our biggest customers is Cisco, who I know Paul's working with as well, the largest wholesale distributor in North America and actually the world on the one hand. And on the other hand, we're working with emerging innovator HelloFresh, the largest meal kit company in the US and now actually the world as well. So there's a lot of scale in both of those cases, but they're very different businesses, very different models, and different cultures, different technology systems that are running those businesses. And what's exciting to us is that we've created a solution that can be tailored to very different businesses in different segments of the supply chain and achieve real results on both the recovery and on the prevention side. So one fun and relevant example for this group this week is one of our customers is a broadline distributor that actually serves the entire Harvard campus. So they provided all of the food that we ate and recovered this week. And over the course of the year or so that we've been working with them, we were able to help them achieve 80% increase in the food that was recovered for human consumption out of their waste stream. And on top of that, we were able to help them achieve zero food to landfill by introducing some local animal farms that they could work with to offload organic waste and avoid sending any organic material to the dumpster and to the landfill. Now, those are exciting from a social and an environmental side for obvious reasons, but also had tremendous impacts for them from a financial standpoint as well. The tax deductions, I know we've had a lot of conversations about that this week, but the reduced hauling costs by working with the farm, win-win, creating win-win dynamics between the supply and the demand side there, and also upstream on the purchasing side of their business, allowing them to have on an item and transaction level understanding of all of the products that they are not selling, why, tagging codes to those. Is that simply surplus? Is it short shelf life and it's just a matter of short coding, or is there some sort of damage that's happening in the warehouse or in the transit process? So they can identify those issues, solve those issues, and even adjust their purchasing frequency or volumes and really address that at the source from a reduction standpoint. So just one fun example related to the food that we've been having on our plates today, but wanted to highlight that.
Yeah. Kind of a dumb question here, but I'll ask it. Are you satisfied with the number of organizations that are tracking their waste? And if not, what are some of the barriers that are keeping them from doing it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's not really a binary question. For the most part, companies are doing something, whether it's donating, recovering, diverting in some way, shape, or form. But many of them are not doing it in a really strategic and thoughtful and data-driven way. So the way we think about it is those companies are the ones that stand to benefit day one from working with a solution like ours and tracking data, establishing a baseline, and figuring out where there's opportunity to improve and capturing that financial value from the onset of a partnership with us. But it's the companies that are really forward-thinking, that are looking at embracing data across prevention and recovery, and thinking about how that can adjust purchasing, how that affects off sales, opportunities to increase revenue, and looking at donations and organic waste diversion as well, that are really going to win in thinking about both the top line growth opportunities and the bottom line impact that it can have on a business. So we work with companies across the spectrum, and there's a lot of opportunities for companies of all shapes, sizes, and maturities to get a lot of value out of the data around shrink and shrink management in general.
Yep. I don't remember what session it was yesterday, but it's come up, I think, in a lot of conversations, the obvious description that everybody has a lot of data. A lot of people on this panel have a lot of data, people out here have a lot of data, but nobody's really aggregating that data. And so just from your perspective, wondering, the data that you have, obviously you're sharing that with your clients, but are you guys doing anything to kind of aggregate it and share out further, or have any plans for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think data there's so much potential in the data, and the reality is even some of the most sophisticated companies in the industry are not very mature in thinking about data specifically related to shrink and to surplus and to waste. So we're at a stage where we're within the four walls of the companies we work with, helping them to get insight, get value out of that information. But the next level to that is absolutely benchmarking different companies within the same corporation, and then even beyond that, looking at how different companies are managing their shrink and sharing best practices and creating a little bit of that gamified benchmarking dynamic that really pushes the envelope for the industry overall. We're seeing a lot of large corporations sign on to public-facing goals, and it's great to see the transparency, the accountability that's creating, and cross-collaboration. We're seeing some of that even here this week, direct competitors sitting at the same table and talking about some of their challenges and best practices. And the data that we're collecting can absolutely empower companies to have the confidence to put those goals on paper and to share those publicly and talk to their customers, talk to the public, talk to their shareholders about how they're going to move the needle on this.
I have a quick
Yeah.
Just a really quick thing. One of the really cool things we're working on from our buyer side, from the restaurant side, is like crowdsourcing data and anonymizing it, and then giving it back to the restaurants and saying, hey, we're seeing a spike in purchasing of this weekend in your, in your zip code. And then it can alert chefs or restaurant owners that like, oh, I forgot there was a holiday and I need to buy more, or I forgot there was a holiday and I need to buy less because we're going to be closed. So that's one of the kind of cool things we're talking about, giving data back.
If I may add to that, the key in finding most retailers and restaurant chains that we work with, they understand the value of the data they have and they don't want to share it because they see it as a competitive advantage. But to your point, if you can give them value back by saying, here's an insight that you wouldn't have gotten, and if you allow me to use your data in an unattributable form, then I will give you this value back and deliver, and the more facets you bring to that, the more likely you're to get to that. And that's what we've found is a way to encourage the reuse of the data. But right now, especially in the retail market, because a lot of the retailers are threatened by Amazon and all they do with data, they don't want their data used in any other form. And so it is a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so actually, let's speak about Zest Labs a little bit more. So again, I'm going to play the naive person here. When I first chatted with you, Peter, I brought up blockchain. Because blockchain is super sexy, right? So I was like, great, we're going to have you on the panel. We're going to talk about blockchain. But for those in the room, remind us kind of about how blockchain works with what you're doing, the technologies that you have, but then really how that enables the larger picture and the work that you're doing.
So I got a little reputation in the blockchain for telling everyone it's not the hype that it's equal to in the food industry, and it doesn't solve all your problems, and it doesn't make food safe on its own. That said, it does help. We've implemented blockchain as part of our solution. Everyone wanted it, now no one wants to pay for it, so it's one of those also. Blockchain is useful as a data exchange and a trusted ledger. As many of you may know, it's peer-to-peer interaction, and it's very secure. Some people say it's unhackable. That's not true, but it's hard to hack. The challenge in any supply chain is exchanging data, and doing so in a trusted form is really a double challenge. And because people will always be suspicious, it's your data, not mine. Can I trust it? And that, in that sense, blockchain does help, because the smart contracts that are part of blockchain are an agreed upon data format that everyone would put in and allow to share amongst those supply chain participants. Blockchain also doesn't have to be open to everyone. There's a form called enterprise blockchain that allows specific access to different partners for specific data sets. All that means basically is you can choose what you want to share to whom, make some parts of it public, and make some parts of it just interchange between you and your customer. The example I'd like to give is, well, you have to somehow incorporate the value of what you're exchanging, probably a wholesale price that you don't want the end consumer to know. So you can protect that piece, and yet you still can give full traceability, pedigree, and provenance of your product. Seafood is what it said it's supposed to be. It was actually line caught, not farmed, and so forth. So blockchain does offer a lot of opportunity and value. It is a technology. It's not the solution. The solution underneath it still needs to stand on its own.
Great. And talk a little bit about the rate of adoption that you're seeing of the service that you guys have in the technology. Given some of the stats that you said earlier, it seems like a no-brainer. But how are you seeing the rate of adoption, and how does that tie into some of the macro trends that you're seeing in the space around growing interest in sustainability, et cetera?
Yeah, I think like a lot of things, especially in the retail industry, also in chain restaurants, they have a lot of imperatives and they have constant competition. So a lot of things are driving their strategic initiatives. Obviously, e-commerce is driving a lot of people to get on board. They have to invest in a lot of things, so they have to make choices. They can't do many strategic initiatives. What we've learned along the way is if you want to be a strategic initiative, you really need to show tremendous value beyond just the simple pieces. There's a lower bar, though, if you're in operational efficiency and day-to-day. And a lot of these retailers and restaurants have to worry about ordering seafood every night, right? And so if you can show value in the operational efficiency, you're more easily adopted, you're more easily taken on, you can more then kind of slip in your strategic benefits. And so what we've gone and said, well, operationally, how do we help day-to-day improve product margin for the retailers? Everyone's under product margin pressure. Everyone's under pressure to be competitive. And so if you can show that, and I would say always look for that value proposition that says operationally I can improve your business day to day, and then I can help you reduce waste, and then I can help you improve sustainability. And that's a byproduct, much like BlueCart talks about, but it shows that value, and that's inherent in your product. But it's not what you're selling, because that's really a tough sell. And believe me, I've tried. We've been at this 9 years, so it's not an easy sell. And the same is true for farmers. Farmers want to do the right thing, but they're hyper competitive, very low margin, and they have a lot of variabilities to contend with, especially weather and different things. And so how do you show the value day to day? And it's operational efficiency for them. How can they reduce costs? How can they be more efficient? And as a byproduct, reduce less or waste less, reduce the waste that they have. And they have it, and they see, one anecdote, we worked with a national lettuce supplier, and the beginnings and ends of seasons are always, they call the shoulder seasons. They're traditionally hard to manage, and rejection rates are very high because the product isn't what it is mid-season. And they, using a product and to do the predictive analytics, we were able to say there was no change in rejection rates from the beginning to the end of the season. That paid back almost tenfold what it cost to use the product. So just getting into that operational efficiency and getting rid of those problems that they have day to day pays off. And now, as a byproduct, though, their waste is way down.
Yeah. Being conscious of the time here, maybe shifting over to you,
Sure.
Speaking a little bit more about the curriculum that you've been working on. I think it was Eileen, maybe yesterday during the Capital Plenary, who talked about potentially for the future, what you're interested in seeing is really this human-centered design approach to solution making. And I think it's really interesting when we were chatting ahead of this panel, you spoke a little bit about how you, in thinking about what you were going to be developing, or even getting the idea to developing the curriculum, you really took what I'm calling a chef-centered approach, right? So you went out into the field and learned about what they need. So can you speak a little bit more about how you kind of came to that conclusion, what you learned from them, and why that, or how that was incorporated into the curriculum?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think one thing that we kind of building off efficiencies, right? When we first heard the data around 40% food is wasted, blah, 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 and started digging into it with ReFed around the restaurant waste, and this idea that depending on which data set you're looking at, it's anywhere from 9 to 15% of the bottom line is in efficiencies lost and revenue lost at the restaurant. And if you think about the overall profit margin for restaurants and how small that is and how you want to eke out every dollar, that sounds like, it doesn't sound like, it's not 40%, right? It's 10%. But that 10% is another full-time staff person, it's another 3 people, it's another location, right? So the idea of how you grow restaurants and pull back some of that efficiency and actually put the profits back in became a big driver for us. And we went and we met all over the country with people about what chefs could do to do this differently, right? So, and everything from, we have to reduce portion size to, we have to collect waste in, white barrels, and, we have to, if they just ordered differently and blah, blah, blah. And then we started talking to the chefs and what were their barriers to doing all of the right things that everybody was asking them to do, right? And some of that was, the health code. So when the health inspector pops in, they don't care that white bucket is for a data study on compost. They just are going to ding you on the fact that you have garbage that isn't in the city can, right? The date labels on your food, and like people, you'd be amazed at how many restaurants put a piece of blue tape over something so they can keep a cheese or a butter a week longer, right? Because of sell by, use by dates, right? Eggs, right? None of that stuff is going to impact your health, but if the health inspector comes in and it's that day or the day after, that stuff has to go in the garbage, right? So we started looking at those barriers. And so then we started looking at literally like chefs, especially in chain, multi-unit operators or institutional settings, were using things that were not whole, right? So they were getting their fish pre-portioned, right? I need 70 ounces of salmon in 4-ounce things, and it's all going to come, and you would never know that was a fish, right? And the same was happening with chicken. The same was happening with steak. And the vegetables were coming prepared. They weren't coming, so that the skills were actually missing. And so some chefs were taking stuff literally out of the trash can and saying, okay, see this? this is $8 that you just wasted because you don't know how to clean that artichoke, or you don't know how to fix that cauliflower in the right way, or you just put all that stuff off to the side, right? So like, of looking and trying to figure out how you design that curriculum to train students. And then the other thing we found was that culinary professionals have been trained with the same curriculum for essentially the last 100 years, right? It is the same modules, it's the same timing, it's the same order. And so we can't revolutionize how CIH teaches a class, or we can't go to Santa Rosa Community College and tell them, oh, that curriculum you've been teaching for 20 years. So how to design a curriculum that instructors would actually use and became useful to them and were able to incorporate. The previews of the curriculum, we had a 26 or so, John will correct me, advisory community of culinary instructors who also sat in every session, who reviewed every module, who looked at every piece. We made videos, it's all gonna be online, it's a huge new platform for us. And part of that was also, they can't take the time to sit in front of a webinar. It has to be something that they can use on their phone. It has to be something they can use on their tablet. It's not, chefs and culinary instructors, not everybody has an office that they can go in and, and do. So like trying to figure out trying to remove as many of the barriers of adoption for the culinary instructors was incredibly important, but then also trying to figure out how we addressed all of the real life barriers for chefs and restaurants to tackle waste in their own kitchens within that, right? Became two very big operating principles for us. And what we're so excited about is it's gonna launch this fall. Rockefeller's has funded the first 500 or so instructors to do it. And then Morton Salt is actually stepping in to help us publicly promote it. So this idea too of trying to make it simple and easy to understand, not only for the instructors themselves, but for all the other additional audiences that have already reached out to us about, hey, can we use this in high schools? Hey, can we use this in our restaurant? Hey, can we use this in our corporate? And we're like, it's not really made for that audience, but sure, right? Like if you want to, and part of that is, I think, simplifying the messages and telling the stories through the eyes of the chefs and the culinary instructors themselves. It is not me, right? It is instructors who look like them. It is instructors with their real life pieces who are all filmed in this beautiful loft in Chicago, right? And they look fantastic. But those were very important things. But I think the two biggest things in terms of like the kind of human-centered design piece was understanding the obstacles by which the culinary instructors face to adopt this, but also addressing the real life concerns of the students and then subsequent professionals who are going to utilize these techniques moving forward. So
before we open up for questions, so please get your great questions ready. These guys are in the hot seats, so don't be shy. Maybe one final question for you, Katherine. Speak a little bit about now moving away from kind of the restaurant chef to the home chef. Mm-hmm. So you've got this cookbook coming out, and speak how those relate or not to the curriculum and what you're doing there.
Yeah, no, I mean, we hope they relate. We hope they pair really well with the launch of the curriculum. They'll come out at the same time. We have a program with the James Beard Foundation called the Chef's Boot Camp for Policy and Change. It's an advocacy training program where we take chefs at a sort of leadership point in their career and teach them to be public policy advocates, teach them to be better advocates on good food system reform. And so about 100 of those chefs have donated recipes where they utilize things that might otherwise have gone unused. So we have, the curriculum is entitled Full Use Kitchen. And then the book will sort of build off that. So the idea that, you'll get a recipe from Stephen Satterfield on how he does make, kale French toast, right? Using the juice of kale stems. And it's accessible for the home chef. It's delicious, right? For those people sort of in that world. But also, different ways to make fried chicken, different ways to utilize all the different things that come into your kitchen. And our hope is that by pushing it out from a consumer standpoint, we can kind of keep all the great momentum of this food waste moment. I feel like this is now our third year in this, and it feels very like, oh, we keep doing this and we see the same people and blah, blah, and how do we make it continuously interesting and of interest to consumers and keep it going, so that the cookbook is the hope of that. And then the hope is that drumbeat in the consumer side actually drives adoption within the culinary professional world, who is not always the quickest to change, right? But if people are coming in and asking, or people are like bringing this thing in, or Steven Satterfield's on the local television, he's a chef in Atlanta, for those who don't know, that they help us do two things: keep the public-facing consumer momentum going so that this doesn't drop off and there's continued interest in great projects and great companies like this, and also changing the long-term sort of culinary behavior over time. So fall's gonna get your food waste campaigns ready for fall, people, because we'll be there.
That's awesome, thanks. So yeah, let's open it up for questions. Yeah, mine.
I have a question, Emily. So as a platform solution, you typically run into a challenge of a lot of companies coming in requesting certain features than what you currently offer. For example, working with Cisco, other organizations will ask for certain features, certain ways of doing things compared to what your product is currently. As you scale and you want to sort of onboard as many businesses as possible, when do you say no, right? Are you focused more on sort of setting what you currently have, or actually building these products for specific to each company? Because that would require a lot of engineering on the team that's actually costly. So what's your strategy here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the classic question for any startup, but especially for folks that lead product like myself. So we as a company are largely split in thirds: sales, customer success, and engineering. So we are really committed to continuing to push the envelope with the product and its capabilities, but we can only move so fast as a young company. So the way that we think about it is really, who is the customer, how big of an opportunity is it, and how important is this feature or capability, and where should that live on the roadmap? How does that fit within our vision, and are there other ways that potentially in the short term we can get there? We are a software company first and foremost, but we also have a big services side. So potentially there are some short-term ways that we can work with a company to really understand what their pain points are, how we can help them, and do a much better job of researching and understanding that problem first and foremost with our customer success team, and then building that into the product as we go. So it's a delicate balance. It's something we think about on a daily basis, but at the end of the day, it comes down to our vision, who's the customer, and what's the pain, and some equation between those two.
Yep.
I wrote it down, I'm somebody who talks in tangent, but restaurants and chefs are always prospecting when it comes to increasing profitability. If the platforms are set up to benefit the restaurant side, to get lower prices for uglies, etc., that, by the way, took the same amount of energy and resources to grow the farmer in. It actually leads to instability on the supply side of the grower. It does not, especially if they don't get fair market value on the farmer side. So I just want to know if there are any systems in place that that are working for a smaller local economy, especially when we're celebrating chefs who benefit from that local farmer community, and either large scale solutions that we're talking about who are the front faces for large scale solutions.
Yeah, I mean, we see the homegrown solution all the time, the farm collaboratives in cities where they have found one person who will be that BlueCart of St. Louis, right, who goes out and sources from folks and will deliver to what we've found is that it takes the community of chefs to say this is what I need and this is who I need it, and then some enterprising person to come in. But it's happening in St. Louis, it's happening in Detroit, it's happening in Asheville, it's happening in Raleigh, where for-profit companies are rising up to become sort of local small-scale distributors that are somewhat focused on seconds or helping the farmers get a value for a product. Some of the resistance they find, and I think farms are one of the untold stories of food waste because we often don't talk. In California, we had a session where we invited a very well-known farmer, sells amazing heirloom tomatoes, and the chefs were, and she did a quick comment that, well, her pigs were the best fed pigs in all of California because they were eating all of her second heirloom tomatoes. And these chefs lost their ever-loving mind. They were like, your tomatoes are amazing. Like, what do you mean? And they were like, we'll come get them. And she's like, no, you won't. You'll come once, right? And maybe you'll come twice, right? And then, oh, by the way, if I want to sell those and make those a real market, I'm going to have to retrain all of the farm workers who are trained to look for ones, right? And who just leave the seconds behind. So her efficiency goes down. Her doesn't necessarily recoup that much money. There's not a ready-made market for it. Her delivery costs go up. And so a solution in California, in Northern California, that grew up was like, one of the people at the session was like, okay, well, I'll start a business. And I'll go around to each of those farms, and I'll come get it, and I'll bring in my stuff. It's working because it's new, but, you know, and I think we're seeing other things. I mean, the stuff that you guys at BlueCart are thinking about with the seconds, I mean, stuff that's Hungry Harvest is doing, which sells, you know, a food that might otherwise be thrown away from distribution points. Like, there's some really cool stuff happening, but it's certainly happening at the local level. It's just hard.
You just can't overlook the baseline that technology levels the playing field for small farmers.
Yeah.
That if you know they now have a tool to give buyers everywhere access to them that they might not have had before, because they just have to go pick it up themselves or not even know about it. So as opposed to a giant, you know, produce supplier in the area, everybody knows them, everybody orders from them. Well, if you give them an outlet to sell their product, you know, we certainly see an increase in small farmers just because of that.
Maybe we'll take one more question before we kind of wrap it up. Oh, okay, great. Let's go right here.
A question for Katherine. Do you hear anything from your chefs around, you know, them trying to educate the public on portion sizes? I hear that, you know, if they attempt that, they need the consumers to ask for it before they can attempt that. What are you hearing from your chefs on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very individualized solution, so we're sort of looking for anecdotes that prove the case across the board, right? And I think a couple things that we're seeing great successes. One is the over trend of small plates, right? We're getting really socialized to 3 tacos or 4 tacos as opposed to a big thing. The other is a concerted effort to encourage people to take things home, right? And with a recipe. So we're seeing some chefs around the country offer like, hey, take this home, and here's a recipe card based off this. So there's a little bit of that movement. So we're starting to see it. Plate size is always, is really the American issue of value for money of food on the plate. And so it works in some areas better than it does in other areas. So really the encouragement of leftovers and taking food home is becoming a little bit more than plate size, but certainly smaller plates, tapas, share plates, which has been around for the last decade or so, has been probably the biggest address of that. So.
Well, so I guess one final question here for the panel, and then definitely if you have questions left, please feel free to approach the panel after. But maybe to wrap things up here, to each of you, what are you most excited about, particularly in the prevention space? And or what opportunity do you see going forward to connect prevention solutions down the chain, so to recovery, to recycling, but in a way that's very holistic? So either one of those questions, but maybe Peter,
Sure.
start with you.
It's exciting. The awareness is way up by people, whether they take action or not. They want to engage in a discussion. They want to know what their options are. So awareness is way up. These functions serve a great purpose to get that awareness up. And people honestly want to do the right things if you can, you know, position a solution that helps them get there while helping out the regular business. That's, I think, the key. But I'm excited to see the awareness is way up and people are really trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as I said, chefs, it's in their DNA not to waste food, and so prevention becomes a very big thing, and helping them find the efficiencies before the food hits the plate so that their ordering is better. That's pretty exciting. I'm just excited that they want to talk about it. I never thought that I would be in a situation where chefs wanted to talk about it so openly, of like, let's not waste this, let's not do this, go on television and talk about it as, and I know we all grapple with like, oh, should we talk about wasted food or trash food or underutilized food? What's the vocabulary? But, you know, watching a chef on Seattle television talk about, hey, like, you know, these carrots you were going to throw away because they look this, like throw them in this stock, and that way you're not going to waste food, and you're going to make some delicious soup at the same time. That incorporation of messaging for me is really exciting because it means that the more we say it, the more consumers will pay attention to it, and the more likely it is over the next 2 decades that we'll see real change, behavior change, which sounds like a really long time, but isn't.
Yeah. For me, I would say just the confluence of stakeholder groups around this issue. So, we're of course seeing, increasing consumer awareness. You're seeing a lot of startups in the space. There's a lot of exciting things happening in policy. Not fast enough, in my opinion, but with policies that can make it so that businesses and nonprofits can better create these solutions. And also in my space in particular, there's a massive increase in big, giant companies that are starting to invest in and play in this space and looking to startups and some innovators like the people here as kind of the tugboat. And if we can help steer those big ships towards a more sustainable and prosperous future, I mean that can really amplify our impact beyond just becoming big entities in and of ourselves. So that's been a really exciting trend to see.
So picking up on a couple of themes, I think behavior change is an incredibly important part of this equation, certainly at the consumer level, but also at the corporate level, from the top down. So really excited about the role that data can play in building the business case for executives at some of the largest companies in the country, multinationals, to really understand why this is a strategic area that they should be engaging in and the effect that it can have on their business in pure dollars and cents. But bringing that down, to the warehouse floor, the role that data can play in accelerating adoption and in really making behavior change sticky by providing that feedback loop about the impact that what they're doing by putting something in this staging area to be sold at a discount or donated versus thrown in the trash, sharing that with them in real time, and then aggregating that on a weekly and monthly basis and giving them the assurance that leaders within their company have visibility into that has been really powerful, and I think we're only in the beginning stages of where that can go.
I love the tugboat thing.
Yeah, I'm stealing the tugboat.
Yeah, so I wrote it down. I think, so BlueCart right now has about 50,000 restaurants on the platform. It's a powerful tool for change, and we're growing all the time. And I think working with everyone here to use it kind of as a vehicle to, let's say, deliver a preparation tip on a fish. Hey, I'm ordering this fish. It also comes with best practices on how to prepare it, so you don't waste things. Because we're at very, very similar. We're at the point of transaction. You're at that moment of I'm making a decision to buy something, and that's kind of where some people would say it all starts. Okay, why am I buying this thing? Can we incorporate a score, like a sustainability score, into an item that people can make purchases based on that, not just price, because that's really what people just buy on now. So can I spend an extra 3 cents more to buy something that's going to be good for the environment and really sustainable, as opposed to spending 3 cents less, just to get 3 cents off? So we really see that in terms of prevention, just constantly updating that access to information on the product level and at that transactional level. That's where we see the change really starting to happen.
That's great. I don't know about you guys, but I just get so jazzed talking with people who are actually doing something. Those of us who can support the work that you're doing, I will continue to do that. I hope you guys will as well. I hope this was really informative and interesting. So maybe a round of applause for our panelists. If you have questions, feel free to approach. Yeah, have a great rest of the day.